Howdy. Today in this video, I'm going to be talking about 3 myths that we see in horsemanship. These are things that I've heard as I've been training horses, that I've seen people say that I think are, just false, but they're interesting. The three myths that I'm going to talk about in this video is the myth that you should never run a horse up a hill, that if you cluck, that it means something specific, and that if a horse, that a horse needs to smell something in order to get comfortable with it. You can see this with saddles sometimes when people train a horse to have a saddle on it the first time. But yeah, so the first part, the first one, the real thing is just people think that if you lope or trot a horse up a hill, then it will ruin a horse's discipline or ability to walk up a hill. And as you guys know, I do a ton of trail riding, and I go up and down hills all the time, and I've done this for 10 years. It's my passion. I love getting to go out and explore, climb lots of mountains, and go places. And people that say that you should never run a horse up a hill, they're applying something that's true, but it's only true in the beginning stages of a horse's training. And even in the very beginning, in the first 90 days, I do trot my horses and run my horse, lope my horses up hills. And so I'm just going to explain that a little bit. So it is true that if a horse runs up a hill, that they have a natural tendency to want to keep running up, just like humans do when we go hiking and we get to a steep section in the hike. We actually naturally we start to want to pick up our pace and jog up it, as long as we think we can get up it with jogging. Most of the time, a hill is easier that way. You can see that in your own house with stairs, or in your own workplace. If you go upstairs, people tend to go upstairs faster than just the walk. They tend to kind of jog up their stairs or jog down their stairs. And so this is how horses are. Horses have this tendency to want to take the easiest route possible. But in the very beginning, it's important to not let a horse trot, and it's important. So for the first, I'd say only really on the first six trail rides, do you want to not let the horse trot or lope up a hill, really. And that will prevent the horse from getting a bad habit and not knowing to walk slow. And it also, one of the main reasons why horses will trot when they get to hills, or when they're trot up or down when they get to hills, is because they're nervous. Because if you think about it, most of the time hills, they prevent eyesight, and where horses really like to be able to see a wide peripheral, and they can see farther than humans. So when they can no longer see even as far as they typically would, that loss of their most important sense makes them a little bit more nervous, and easier to spook. And so so a lot of the time hills, when a horse is at the bottom of a hill, it loses sight of the front, because if it's like a valley and the horse is down in the center, a horse will want to trot up because it has poor vision, and it'll want to trot down into it because of the same reason. And there's also the reasons, like I said, horses will trot just because it's easier. But those are the 2 main reasons why a horse will go faster if you than what you would expect if you were. Because a lot of the time you think they'd want to go slow because you think that the horse would trip going down the hill, or that it would just get tired of trotting or loping up a hill. But that actually isn't the case. They're pretty athletic, and that stuff doesn't really bother them too much. So my next myth that I'm going to get to, myth number 2, is that people only use one form of pressure when it comes to clicking or clucking. They only use one form of pressure, for one response. And and this applies in their psychology, like in the way that people understand horses. They do this in more than one way with their horses, and it's actually a super big mistake on their part of reading a horse. It's a super big like lack in wisdom, because a horse doesn't need a form of pressure to only mean one thing. But let's go through the horse training process and explain why it is that clucking is useful and the correct approaches to using clucking. Obviously that you can use clucking for, you can train a horse without clucking. It's not like it's necessary. It's super helpful because if your hands are tied up, then you can add pressure with clucking, or you can use voice commands. You can use any type of pressure. Any type of noise is a type of pressure. And so you can do whatever you want to increase pressure if your hands are tied up. But keeping it consistent throughout the training is helpful, because sometimes a horse won't regard a certain noise as a pressure. If a horse is used to hearing you sneeze and cough, then when you cough, it's not gonna think that it means to move. Where the sound of clucking, it doesn't happen naturally a lot, and so I think that's why people have decided it. I don't know actually the core origins of like who started the cluck. I think it's kind of funny. And so, yeah. So in the training process, the cluck is used with horses to increase the pressure, like I said. It's often my middle pressure. So like I'll do really light pressure with the body cue, and then when I want to get to the medium pressure, I'll do the light cue, and then I'll start clucking, and that creates more. And then after that, I'll go to my enforcing, like the harder cue. So, and in all of my exercises that I do with like round penning, like all of the round penning, yielding the hindquarters, lunging, they all require the horse to, when it hears the cluck, to move its feet. And so it's really interesting because after only about probably like 25 days of doing this, of rewarding a horse, when it moves its feet from the cluck, the horse actually no longer thinks about it. See, in the very beginning when you're training a horse, and the first time you ever cluck, the horse is like, what does cluck mean? Like, how can I get this guy to shut up? Why is he clucking so much? And so they keep trying to move their feet in different ways, and they're like, man, this clucking's getting annoying. And then when they figure out that clucking means to speed up, they get the release. And so that first time they're thinking about it, they're thinking about like, what does cluck mean? And that's how it is the next like 15 times you're clucking with the horse. But once you get into the 20th exercise of teaching a horse something, the horse actually doesn't think about what clucking means. It actually just, it has just the brain has tied such a quick response to the noise of the cluck that the brain actually doesn't think about it anymore, and it actually just instantly moves its feet. And that's super helpful. But it's also poor training, or it's just a lack of wisdom in a trainer to think that that's the only use that you can use a cluck for. And so what I've found is I actually like to teach a horse with all forms of pressure. I like to master the forms that I give a horse. So with clucking, I like a horse to always be thinking about what I'm doing. So that's what makes a good horse, is if the horse can think through a bind, and if they are never just reacting, and never have just this mental connected response. You don't want a horse to just have a mental connected response to something, because that actually makes the horse lazier, not like working, not like thinking through problems, and you can get so much more. And most people haven't rode a horse that actually knows how to think through problems as deeply as the horses that I train. But so after I've done a lot of my saddle training, usually it's about after, 45 days or 50 days, I decide to teach a horse to back up. And when I teach a horse to back up, I use clucking again, but this is the first time that the horse actually hears a clucking sound, and it doesn't mean move your feet forward. And it's really cool to see the horse think through the problem. It's not hard for the horse in any way. It doesn't confuse the horse. It actually just makes the horse wiser. It makes the horse know how to think about if a clucking sound means what it actually means. And I love that. I love a horse to be presented a problem, to be put in a bind, and to be like, wait, yesterday, and for it to be able to think through and say, okay, wait, yesterday, this noise meant to move my feet forward. Today, there's something different about today. The way he's pushing his feet on the, like resting his body weight in the saddle, the way that he's pulling on my mouth with the bit, there's something different today. I think that when I hear the cluck today, that it means to move my feet backwards. And it's that thought process. It's the ability that a horse has to actually think through a problem, to find its way out of a bind that you put it in, that makes a horse such a great riding companion and and just a good work partner. They're able to do their super intelligent decisions. But we kind of limit that if we always associate one specific thing to one result, one cue to one behavior, and that's just not necessary. But yeah. So after teaching a horse to back up from the clucking sound, the horse's brain is better, and it doesn't mix. Like, the horse understands that if I then ask the horse to move forward and I cluck, the horse does it, because a horse is so in tune. Their senses are so acute. They can pick up, anybody with horses knows this. They can pick up just any slight shift in your saddle pressure, in your collection of the bit, like on any softness of pressure that you give the horse. And so to think that you have to have that sound be specifically for one cue is just unintelligent training. But and then another example of how clucking doesn't only mean to move your feet forward is like, and this one makes me laugh a lot of the time. I'll go into it. So people will cluck to catch a horse, and I just think it's hilarious. Like, I never cluck to catch my horses because naturally, in a horse, when they feel pressure, when they hear or feel pressure, their reaction is to move away from the pressure. And so, and this even goes for trained horses. Like their reaction is to move away. Preferably, they'll think about it before moving away, but it's still just their natural reaction when they're exposed to something, a new form of pressure, for them to want to get away from it. And so, if somebody is coming up to a horse and they want the horse to get caught, and they're like, "Come here." What they're actually doing is they're making movement and they're making noise, and horses are scared of movement and noise. And so it's super likely that the horse is gonna start moving its feet, and that the direction it starts moving its feet in are gonna be away from you. Now, thankfully, horses are curious enough that typically they'll still come after. They'll come around and see you, but the actual response that horses have to people clucking at them when people are trying to catch them is the horse actually moves away from the person. And this isn't true. And this is proving my point that the cluck can mean multiple things. Most people they say that the cluck only means one thing. Like when I cluck, it only means to go into the trot. But they actually are wrong, because a lot of those people that say that, they also cluck, and the cluck means come here. Like, it means I have grain in a bucket, and you guys get to come here and I'll catch you. And so, yeah, that's people can train horses to respond to the same cue and in different behaviors. And so that's that myth. Now the last myth is just that horses need to be able to smell an object in order to be comfortable with it, or in order to know that it's there. Like, that's the funniest thing to me. So a horse depends most on their eyesight. That is their biggest sense. Horses, they have a great sense of smell, but They actually have the same amount of scent glands and like receptors as a dog does, but they don't have the part of their brain developed like a dog does to be able to relate smell as acutely as a dog does to like an object. Um, um, and so yeah, it's like humans have about like 2,000 receptors in our nose to be able to, so we can recognize 2,000 different scents. But horses and dogs, they both have 300,000, and then like an elephant has like way more than them. The elephant has the best nose. It can detect the most different, the highest abundancy or like variety of smells. And anyways, the reason why I'm getting at that rant is because people don't need to depend on a horse's sense of smell in order to teach the horse to be comfortable with something. Yeah, I mean, this is like, people think that in order to start like brushing a horse, that they need to let it smell their hand first, or before they saddle the horse, that they need to show the horse the saddle and let the horse smell it. They think that, just like farriers often, a farrier will often, like before shoeing the horse, they'll let the horse smell all of his equipment. And all of these things, obviously they do help a horse get more accustomed to the object, but it is in no way necessary. And if a horse has actually already learned to think through problems and like about the pressure and then it gets exposed to a new object, there is no help of having the horse smell it compared to anything else, because the horse has already learned to think about the pressure of that new object without smelling it. And if you're teaching your horses to be dependent upon their smell to be comfortable, then you're going to get hurt when you are in a scenario, or like the horse is going to fail in a scenario when you don't have time, or you just don't have the means and ability to let the horse smell whatever it is that the horse is scared of. Or yeah, like what if horses are scared of something that has no smell, like water, then that technique isn't the most helpful. But you can see that this is true in my colt starting videos. If you watch my first time saddling, second time saddling, third time saddling, you can see that I don't try to like let the horse smell the object. The most important thing is I just have it close. It's all about showing that the thing doesn't hurt the animal, and really just like letting a saddle pad or a saddle touch a horse and be near a horse is where you make the most progress. It's not in letting the horse smell it. And when a horse is smelling something naturally, it's a side of their curiosity, or like it's a side of their curiosity. I meant to say like that it's more of it's a manifestation that they're curious. It's actually kind of, it's a little bit, it's a little bit difficult for somebody that isn't a professional at reading horse behavior to know if they should let a horse smell something, because sometimes a horse smelling something actually means that the horse is being a little bit pushy in its attitude. Sometimes when a horse wants to move another horse, they'll go over to it and they'll start smelling it and they'll start wiggling their lips on it and then start biting. And so when a horse, like for example, if you get on a horse in the saddle and the horse continually keeps going around and smelling your feet, then the horse might be aggressively trying to get you to get off, or just is trying to be aggressive towards your feet. And because there's a possibility of that, most people that don't know how to read language really well and acutely from a horse, it's better for them to actually not have their horse smell their feet. It's better for them to let the horse, make the horse bring its head back in front of it. And people will be like, oh, you're not letting a horse do its normal safety check. And while that's true, most of the time that safety check has a negative result to it that isn't worth the horse making the safety check. I let my horses do the safety check because I can acutely see when the horse starts to get a little bit too aggressive with the curiosity, or if it starts to get too unfocused. Because you don't want a horse to be curious all the time, because a curious horse isn't paying attention. A curious horse is in its own world. It always has both ears forward, and it's got like the binocular vision going. It's not paying attention to its peripheral vision. It's just looking at like one thing, and so it's not focused on you. But I'm just gonna think if there's anything else with that. On the topic of a horse being curious, so if a horse is manifesting curiosity, the horse A isn't paying attention, B, it's not being submissive, it thinks it's the one in charge. And I think there's even more to it. Well, if I think of any additional insights on a horse being curious, I'll let you know. It wasn't the intent of this episode or this video. So thank you for discovering these myths with me. If you guys happen to know or think of any other interesting myths that you hear with horsemanship, I'd love to hear it and get to talk about it more. Thank you.